everybody. Welcome. I am Sarah of Expat in Croatia, and this is 5 Question Friday. How are you? I haven't seen you in a few weeks. I've missed you terribly. For those of you who are brand new, every Friday at 5 o'clock Croatia time, I answer 5 questions from people who have sent them in on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, expatinCroatia.com, email, my consulting sessions, I don't know, people who yell them at me. But I have been off for the last few weeks. I have been in Texas, my motherland, for some urgent family business, which was a funeral. Actually, I went to 2 funerals. They kind of happened 2 days apart, so I was there for both of them, and that was tough. That was tough. To do 2 funerals a few days apart, but anyways, yeah, so now I'm back. Texas is all encompassing. Like, when I got there, it was like Croatia did not exist. Texas just swallowed me whole. It was almost like Texas and Croatia are not allowed to exist in the exact same universe at the same time, without everything just imploding. It was really strange. The Texas culture is really intense. Really mega super hella intense. It's a cult. And I'm party to that cult. Got the Texas tattoo. Like, I was indoctrinated many moons ago. But you know, its culture is as strong as Croatia's. Sometimes I wonder if that's why Croatia was an easy transition for me, because there are a lot of similarities to the culture. That there are Confederate flags everywhere and split, but that is another topic for another time. Anyways, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my trip, and then we're going to dig into the questions. I've got 5 great questions for you. So 2 funerals, which were both completely different. One was like a hardcore Catholic one, and then the other one was a hippie one. So the hippie one was my godmother. My godmother died on March 10th, and is magnificent. I'm so grateful to have my godparents. I've always been really close to them. And so she passed, and because she loves color, her favorite color is like royal purple. So for her funeral, we asked everybody to wear tie-dye. She used to tie-dye and like lots of bright colors. So it was a funeral full of colors and lots of music and celebration. And at the end, there were kids that were blowing bubbles as people were exiting the church. It was a really unorthodox one, but it made perfect sense for her. And I'd like to think that she really loved it. So I had this beautiful purple dress that I bought in London, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this reminds me of her. And then after I got there to Texas, because I didn't make it there before she died, I was going around, my godparents live in my college town where I went to university, and I was walking around the square, and I found this vintage shop, and I wandered in, and I found the most beautiful big purple hat fastener, like British fastener, that matched it. And so that's what I wore. It was pretty. It was sad, but it was also a really positive experience. I gotta say, the most positive funeral I have ever attended. And then the other one, I was just like jet black head to toe. That was for the father of one of my closest friends, and I'm really glad that I was able to be there for that. But aside from that, I ate lots of good food. I got my Texas accent back, which I cannot turn on. A lot of people are like, I want to hear you speak Texan. I'm like, I can't do that. I can't just turn it on like that. Maybe some people can. I cannot. If I try and turn it on, then it just comes out fake. But all it takes for me to get my Texas accent back is to hear someone else with a Southern accent, a Southern American accent, and then all of a sudden it comes back. So my first, it started to come back on my flight from Munich to Charlotte. On my way there was this flight attendant named Trudy, and she had this, North Carolina accent, and it just started to come back immediately. And then once I landed, my friend Caleb picked me up, and then I could hear it in his voice, and oh my gosh, I just had the deepest Texas accent. I really enjoyed it. It's not that I don't like my Texas accent. I like it, but I trained myself to get rid of it when I moved to New York because I didn't want people to think that I was a redneck. And I was working, you know, in financial, like big global corporations. So, but also I tend to absorb accents very easily. So I have this kind of nondescript mutt accent now. But my Texas accent has already pretty much disappeared. It's sad, but that's the way it is. So if you ever want to get it back, if you speak a Southern American accent to me, I will likely come out and give it right back to you. What else? Oh, while I was home, so citizenship update. I submitted my application for citizenship with an expired background check and an expired birth certificate, because the expiration is that Croatia imposes is 6 months from the date of issue. Well, mine were 1 year, and it just took so long for me to get everything together. And I was like, whatever, I'm just going to submit it this way and see what they say. Well, now we're just so far down the pipe, and it's much easier to obtain those things from inside the US. So I spoke to my lawyer, and she was like, well, Sarah, since you're there, why don't you go spend a few $100 and get these again? All right. So I went and got my birth certificate, and then the easiest way was to just drive down to Austin and go to the Secretary of State in person. It's like 3 hours each way. It's like driving between Split and Dubrovnik in a day. So I grabbed my friend. I was like, you want to go to Austin? All right. So we drove down there, had lunch, got my apostille, drove back. Then I went and did my FBI background check, did my fingerprints and the whole thing, and now it's in DC getting its apostille. God, it's such a laborious process, man. It's so expensive. Oh, I really hope this is the last background check that I ever have to obtain from the US. That would be super cool. And the last birth certificate for that matter. So fingers crossed. And supposedly next week, someone's going to be asking the powers that be about my application. So I hope I'll have some news for you about that then. But enough about me. That's essentially what's been going on with me while I've been gone. I've missed you guys a lot. I really have. I'm glad to be back. I'm a little jet lagged, but I'm glad to be back. So now we're going to dig into the questions. Yay! Okay. So the first one comes from Tyler. I hope Tyler's out there. I saw Tyler last Saturday at our Americans in Croatia event. So he asked, can you buy cheesecloth in Croatia? And I want to... What the... Hold a second. I know for a fact that I brought cheesecloth in here to show you what it was. I know that I did this. Oh, my jet lag brain is really doing a number on me. Hang on a second. I'm going to grab you some cheesecloth. This is cheesecloth. So, cheesecloth is used for a lot of food stuff, essentially, but you can use it to strain out stock if you're making stock, or you can use it to make cheese, or to strain out yogurt or something like that. I've always wondered where you can buy this. Actually, this came from the States on a previous trip. I usually try and buy some whenever I'm there. I know that I asked someone at a kitchen store in Croatia the first year I was here, and they looked at me like I was an insane, crazy person. Fair. So we found out what it's called and where you can buy it. So it's called pamuchna gaza, which essentially means cotton gauze. Now, gauze is different than cheesecloth. Yes, it has some similarities, but gauze is like for injuries and cheesecloth is for food. But that's what they call it. And apparently you can obtain it at pharmacies, but you can also get it online. So my guess is at the pharmacies it's going to be more like the injury kind, but who knows. So I was doing some Googling today in Croatian, and there are different types. So some are gauze, some are injuries, but others are for cooking. So I found the most options when I Googled Kupi Gaza Sir, which means buy gauze cheese. So whenever I want to try and see if I can buy something in Croatia rather than having to get it on Amazon and pay all the shipping, I always just search Kupi, K-U-P-I, which means buy. and then whatever it is that I want to buy. And then that's the easiest way for me to find out if something's available in Croatia. So that's what I did here, and that's how I was able to find a bunch of sites that do sell like proper cheesecloth to be used in food. Some of them called it muslin, but when I Googled like Koopy muslin, it just came up with fabric instead of the actual cheesecloth. So thank you so much to Tyler for prompting this question, because it has been plaguing me for a very long time. Okay, next, this is Susan from Susan. It came in on our 5-question Friday form. If a U.S. Croatian dual citizen is a permanent resident in Croatia, but they work in the U.S. and receive income from their U.S.-based company, will they have to pay income tax in Croatia in addition to their taxes in the U.S.? I know the newly signed income tax treaty is in the works, but I would like to know if there's currently a foreign income tax exclusion to avoid double taxation. Also, are there certain thresholds? Thank you. So, I am going to speak about this. I'm going to answer these questions from an American perspective, but there are some pieces to this puzzle that apply to anybody with a double taxation treaty or without a double taxation treaty. For example, Australia does not have a double taxation treaty in place with Croatia. I don't think Mexico does either. So, as far as the American double taxation treaty, it has been signed, it has not been ratified. That means it's not active. And we found out in the last 2 weeks that even once it's ratified, it could take years for Croatia and the United States to adjust their laws and regulations to accommodate it. So it could be years before we see any actual tangible benefit from that taxation treaty. And I know everybody's on the edge of their seat. Sit back in your chair, because it's going to be a while. So, in terms of, I'll talk about the specific of the U.S. and then I'm going to broaden it out to everybody, okay? So, in terms of the U.S. Has 2 things that you can use. The foreign earned income exclusion, which if you're not paying taxes to Croatia, that means that you don't have to pay taxes on your first $112,000 worth of earned income, so working income, not passive income, but that does not apply to self-employment tax. I am considered self-employed by the U.S. standards, so I still have to pay self-employment tax in the United States. It's garbage. And then is the foreign paid tax credit. That's if you do pay taxes to Croatia. So if Croatia taxes are higher than the U.S., then no tax is owed to the U.S. Now, Croatia has a similar policy. So now I'm going to jump into the broader scope of the tax system in Croatia that would inform for everybody. So not just Americans, but this would apply to pretty much everybody. So there are a lot of countries that have double taxation treaties. Some of them don't. The ones that do have treaties, the terms of those treaties differ. So everybody's case is different. Everybody's nationality plays a role, where you make the income plays a role, the kind of income plays a role. So there are just so many factors. You know, there's no absolutes when we're talking about taxes, because it really depends on everybody's individual situation. And I, of course, have to say, I am not a licensed tax advisor. I cannot give tax advice, but I will talk about the rules. And in terms of how Croatia handles foreign income, when you are living in Croatia for more than 183 days, you are considered a tax resident by law, which means you're obligated to report and potentially pay tax on your worldwide income. Now, if you are from a country or earning income in a country that does not have a double taxation treaty, as in America, Mexico, Australia, then in that case, you have to report it, and the way Croatia looks at it is you're a resident in Croatia, so we have your tax residency, which means we're going to calculate how much tax you owe us based on all of your income, and if it's higher than what you pay in the U.S., then we charge you the difference, and if it's lower than what the U.S. is charging you, then you don't pay anything at all. Generally speaking, that is how it works. So, yeah, you're not necessarily paying double tax, even though there's not a treaty. But you do have to report it, and if you ever want to find out what your liability is before you start reporting it, contact us. We'll be happy to connect you with a vetted tax advisor here in Croatia that can help you figure that out. Okay, so that's the big tax spiel, guys. So thank you so much to Susan for asking that question. All right, next, this comes from Tommy on our 5-Question Friday forum. Do I need to first open a business to purchase a duplex where one unit is currently leased to a long-term tenant? And where can I find information if I'd like to do a deep dive into business taxes? So his first question, he wants to buy a duplex that already has a long-term tenant. In that situation, does he need to open a business? The answer is no. So we have talked a lot on previous episodes about the right to work. And if you want to open up a company without the right to work, you have to obtain the right to work by hiring 3 full-time Croatians, investing 35,000 euros into the business, that kind of thing. Now, if you wanted to rent out accommodation without the right to work, then you'd have to open up a business. And to open up a business without the right to work, you have to hire those 3 full-time Croatians. With me so far? But if you are doing long-term rental to a tenant, like you were making a rental contract with them, they're going to be staying there for a year, something like that, you don't have to have a company to do that. You can do that as an individual. You also don't have to have the right to work. You can do that as an individual. So no, he does not have to open up a company if he wants to buy a property that already has a long-term tenant. That's not necessary. And then as far as doing a deep dive on business taxes depend on a variety of factors. It depends on the business structure that you're planning to do. So there's Obert, that's a trade. Oberts have 3 different tax structures. You get to choose which one is most beneficial for you. Pauschalny Obert is the best option. It has the least amount of oversight, the least amount that you have to pay. It's just best all around. And then you have LLCs. LLCs have their own income tax. You also have profit tax. You also have surtaxes, which are on employment contributions. So there's a number of different taxes. We have guides to all of that on our site. If you would like to see any of them, just send us a DM and we'd be happy to send it to you. So that's where you should go for that. And of course, a tax advisor can also speak to you about exactly what your business activity is and what the best structure is for that activity in your situation so that you can better understand what kind of taxes you're looking at. Okay, next question. This comes from Nadia, also on the 5-Question Friday form. If my partner and I take turns applying for digital nomad permits and family reunification in between, would this count towards permanent residence? We have children involved in local sports teams, and that is the primary reason for not just being a nomad elsewhere for 6 months and then coming back. So I just want to make sure that this is completely clear. This is a couple. One of them is a digital nomad, and one of them is getting residence based on family reunification with that digital nomad. They're asking that if they switch on their second year to where this person is the digital nomad and this person is going through family reunification, and then in the third year, if this person is the digital nomad again and they go through family reunification and so on and so forth for 5 years, can they obtain permanent residence based on that? In theory, yes. Yes, in theory. There's no guarantee that that will be the case, but as of right now, there does not seem to be any barrier to that. According to the law, there's no, it does not state that the time spent on a digital nomad permit does not count towards permanent residence. So all the resources we have is that time does count towards permanent residence. So if you just keep going back and forth on that same program, then yeah, in theory, you could accrue the 5 years that would allow you to qualify to apply for permanent residence. Now, there are a few caveats to that and catches, so it's important that we talk about those. So one, when you get to permanent residence, qualify to apply for permanent residence, you have to have a Croatian salary to be able to qualify. So you can be a digital nomad for those 5 years, but then when you go to apply, you need to have a Croatian salary. That's just one of the requirements. So that could mean opening up a company. That could mean getting a job at a Croatian company you don't own. But nevertheless, that is something that you need to be prepared for if permanent residence is your goal. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're applying based on family reunification, the spouse who's applying based on family reunification does not have the same rights as the digital nomad. The digital nomad has the right to work. They have a right to a tax exemption on their working income, and they have a right to not sign up for the state health care. The partner does not have that. The partner does not technically have the right to work. The partner does not have the tax exemption on working income, and the partner is required to sign up for state health care. So technically, if those two people are switching back and forth, whoever is the spouse that's working and is applied based on family reunification, technically they're not allowed to work, technically. That's just, those are the rules. And also you don't have the tax exemption, so you would have to report your worldwide income to Croatia. So that's important to know. We have a very detailed guide on applying for the digital nomad residence permit, as well as an FAQ. If you would like either of those, just send us a DM. We'll be happy to shoot them over to you. Okay, is this our last question? Oh my gosh, yes it is. So our last question comes from Lisa. I had a consulting session with Lisa before I went to Tejas. My grandmother was born at home, and I'm not sure I can find her birth certificate. I want to apply for citizenship based on my great-grandparent. What can I do? I spoke to our head lawyer about this to find out what people do in those situations, because we have a lot of situations where someone's applying based on a parent. Let's put that over here in a box, because we're not talking about that scenario right now. What we're talking about is when someone wants to apply on a relative where they have multiple generations. So they're applying based on a grandparent, in which case the parent is in between. Or they're applying based on a great-grandparent, in which case they have a grandparent and a parent that's in between. So whenever you're applying, you need to have your original birth certificate that has an apostille on it, and you have to, it's a newly issued copy. And then for your relative who was born on the territory of Croatia and moved abroad, you have to have a new issued copy of that from the Republic of Croatia, period, the end. But for the people in between, you are supposed to have birth certificates, because that's how you connect them in a straight line. However, sometimes you can't get a birth certificate. In this case, she's not sure she can find a birth certificate for her grandmother. She was born at home in the States, and she hasn't been able to find that one exists. So what can she do about this? So our head lawyer said that a baptismal certificate would work in lieu of this, and there are situations where you could potentially use a death certificate, because that usually has a lot of the same information on it as a birth certificate would. So that is possible, as long as it is very clear from the documentation that you can connect your Croatian relative to you one by one, generation by generation. That has to be very clear. And you also want to make sure that you explain that in your CV biography, and you also want to explain that in your family tree that you have to provide. So it's very easy for the caseworker to kind of map all these things. As an aside, I heard a crazy fun fact today. I was speaking to one of our lawyers in Zagreb, and apparently 30,000 people have applied for Croatian citizenship based on descent last year. Boosh! Seriously, most of them from the US, does not surprise. But yeah, that's like a huge number. It's a huge number. I mean, we talk to, I would say, thousands of people each year, but not 30,000. I don't think we've hit 30,000 just yet, but that is a lot. That's pretty neato. So if you are planning to apply for Croatian citizenship, or you know someone who is, or you're thinking about it, we have a guide on how to apply for citizenship by descent. We have a few different guides. We also have 10 things you need to know before you apply for citizenship. And we can also help you figure out if you even qualify. Maybe you don't know if you qualify. We can help figure that out for you. So just send us a DM and we'll be happy to help. Hey Terry, thanks. I like this jacket too. That's it, guys. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad to be back on track with you. We'll be back next Friday too, and pretty much all the Fridays after that, barring apocalypse of some kind. We are going to be putting something out on stories, so please look out for that. 2 things we're going to put out on stories that I would like you to look out for. So one thing is there is like a giant mess, like foobar thing that is happening at Zagreb MUP. And we would like to hear your stories of what you're dealing with at Zagreb MUP. So if you have any stories to share, or images or video of those giant lines that are happening at 4:30 in the morning, and you would be open to us sharing that with everybody out there, please shoot them over and Danielle will collect those. I'm going to be doing a video next week about what's going on with Zagreb. I had a chat with our lawyer in Zagreb today about it to kind of get a little bit of an insider perspective on what's happening there. So we want to make sure that we share that situation for anyone who has not had the pleasure of camping out at Zagreb MOP yet. Second thing, so I took a lot of video when I was in Texas, and I would really love to share with you my home video that I made of my trip. But you know, that's Texas stuff, and this is a Croatia channel, and I know you're here for Croatia stuff, so we're gonna put out a poll on stories, and if you would like to see Sarah's home video from Texas, just vote yes. And if you have no interest and you're like, I can't even believe you would even ask us this, then select no. And I will just keep it to myself and my friends and my family. But yeah, I did quite the tour down memory lane while I was back in Texas. It was well, the reason I went was, you know, for sad reasons. It was really a positive trip overall. It really was. So I'd love to share it with you. I went to where the house I grew up in and took video there, although the house I grew up in is next door to my uncle. I grew up living next to my uncle and my grandma, very Croatian actually. So I see it every time I'm there. And I went by all the places that I lived when I was in college and everything. Anyways, lots of stuff to share. So that's it, guys. If you ever need anything, if you have questions about Croatia, if you just need a guide and you're not sure how to find it on our site or just don't even know where to start, send us a DM. We're always here for you. So have a wonderful weekend. I hope you're enjoying this spring, and I will see you next Friday for another edition of 5 Question Friday. Bye! Beauty